The first time I smelled it, I thought it was nothing. A trace of sweetness in the hallway, vanilla and something floral, too loud to be mine. Lara didn't wear perfume, not really, and neither did I still. I brushed it off. Maybe someone at work had hugged her, maybe it was laundry detergent, maybe anything, but then I found it again. On the hoodie draped over the couch, the one Lara always borrowed from me. The scent clung like a whisper I wasn't meant to hear. A week later, it lingered on my pillow, the one she always pressed her face into when she stayed the night. I told myself I was being paranoid. We lived with Kira, after all. Maybe it was hers. Maybe our apartment was a small loft above an old bakery with wide windows and terrible insulation. But it was ours, a place we had made soft with books and secondhand lamps, her digital tablet on the coffee table, and my tea mugs scattered like breadcrumbs from room to room. I loved Lara with a kind of still, quiet devotion that doesn't demand anything back, not even assurance. I didn't need grand declarations. I just needed her near. She had moved in 6 months ago, after a night on the balcony where she'd said, "I can't imagine falling asleep without you anymore." And I believed her. That evening, I came home early. A client canceled last minute, and I thought I'd surprise her with dumplings from the little place she loved 2 blocks over. The hallway was quiet. Our door was unlocked. Inside. Music was playing softly, not our usual playlist. Jazz, smoky, sensual. I set the takeout on the counter. That's when I saw the 2 glasses, one half full with red wine, the other smudged. With lipstick, laughter floated down the hallway. 2 voices. Hers and Kira's. It was the way Kira laughed that stopped me. Low, throaty, intimate. A sound I'd never heard from her before. Not in all our years of living together. I moved quietly, barefoot, heart thudding in my throat. The door to our bedroom, was ajar. The overhead light was off. Soft lamplight flickered against the wall. I pushed the door open, and there they were. Lara, with her back arched, sheets tangled at her waist. Kira, one arm resting on the small of her back like she owned her. A wine glass on the nightstand. Music still playing. My breath caught. For a second, the scene didn't register as real. I felt like I was watching a bad indie film, the kind with shaky cameras and slow piano music, but no one yelled, "Cut." No one stood up. Lara turned her head first, her eyes wide, mascara slightly smudged. She sat up, pulling the sheet around her. "Wait, it's not what you think," she said. Always the first sentence of a lie. Kira didn't speak. Her gaze flicked toward me, then away. Like I was an inconvenience, like I had walked in too early during a rehearsal. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just backed out of the room. I remember how cold the floor felt beneath my feet as I walked to the bathroom. I shut the door, turned on the light, and looked in the mirror. There I was. Same sweater, same tired eyes. Same person who had believed in loyalty like it was a virtue, not a liability. Who was I to them? That was the only question circling my mind as I stared at my reflection. Who was I when they laughed behind closed doors? When they touched in my bed? When I sat at the dining table making dinner for 3? The perfume made sense now. So did the tension. So did the extra wine, the late nights, the silence. It wasn't just Lara who broke something in me. It was Kira too, my friend, my roommate, my person before Lara ever walked into the picture, and suddenly everything I had built, the trust, the small rituals, the stories we shared felt like cardboard in a storm outside the bathroom. I could hear them moving, voices hushed. I didn't want to know what they were saying. I locked the door. I sat on the floor. I hugged my knees like a child, and for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I belonged in my own home. It started at a book launch I almost didn't attend. The kind of overlit community event where the wine is warm, the chairs creak, and everyone pretends to have read the author's last 3 books. I'd gone out of guilt, a colleague had organized it, and I was already planning my quiet exit when I heard her laugh. It wasn't loud. It was something softer, like someone exhaling surprise. I turned, and there she was, Lara, sitting in the 3rd row, head tilted back, fingers tucked beneath her chin like she was balancing sunlight. She was laughing at a line no one else found funny, something obscure about forgotten women and badly written memoirs. And yet there she was, lit from within, as if she'd just remembered her own story. She caught me watching her. I looked away, but when I passed by during intermission, she reached for my wrist and said, "You have the eyes of someone who's never been properly loved." Just like that, not a question, a diagnosis. I should have walked away. I should have smiled politely and kept going. But instead, I laughed too hard, too nervously, and sat down beside her. We talked through the entire second half of the reading. I didn't even remember the author's closing remarks. I remembered the way Lara's voice shifted when she talked about art, the way her fingers danced through the air like they were sketching invisible ideas. By the end of the night, she had my number saved as writer girl, and I walked home with a tremor in my chest I hadn't felt in years. We were cautious at first. I'd spent too many nights curled around disappointments that had promised permanence. But Lara had a gravity to her, like she believed the world owed her intimacy, and somehow it obeyed. She'd bring pastries to my office, leave sketches on post-it notes under my pillow, send me voice memos at 2 a.m. just to say, "I miss." The way your breath sounds in sleep. 5 months in, she moved in. It felt fast, but right. She said she couldn't think straight in her apartment anymore. It didn't feel like home unless I was there. I remember Kira teasing me. "You sure you're not just a cozy stop on her chaos tour?" She didn't say it cruelly, just pointedly. I waved it off. Kira had always been overprotective. She'd known me since undergrad, since the heartbreak that had made me stop dating for a year. She'd lived through the version of me that believed in fairy tales and the one that didn't. Back then, Kira had just moved back into the city after a breakup. I offered her the spare room. It made sense. We'd always been good roommates. Clean lines, shared meals, different schedules. And I trusted her. She was family. Things weren't perfect, but love rarely is. I learned to ignore the little things. The lingering texts from Lara's ex, the way she laughed too hard at Kira's jokes, the way she would dodge conversations about the future by making sex a distraction. She'd whisper, "Let's not ruin this with plans," as if stability was the enemy of romance, but I was already in too deep. There was one night I still think about, the night I turned down a marriage proposal. It came from Maya, a woman I'd known since I was 24. We weren't dating anymore, hadn't been for years, but she came back into my life briefly, steady and kind as ever. We had dinner one evening, catching up, and when she said, "If you ever change your mind about love, I'm still here," I almost cried. I told Lara about it that night. Her response was to laugh and pull me into bed. "You'd be so bored with someone that's safe," she whispered. I told myself she was right. I convinced myself that passion came with unpredictability, that maybe love wasn't meant to feel secure. I didn't realize it then, but Lara was rewriting my definitions of loyalty, of worth, of what I deserved. She didn't ask me to distance myself from my family, but I did. They didn't understand my relationship. My mother thought Lara was too shiny too quick, and my sister once muttered, "She talks like someone who's practicing a script." I stopped calling them as often. I chose the woman I believed in. Even my writing changed. I used to write about women finding themselves, But with Laura, I started writing to keep her. Every sentence was a prayer that she'd stay. Looking back, the signs were always there. She never made space for permanence. Her toothbrush moved, but not her. Paperwork. Her laughter was loudest when it wasn't for me. And Kira, she started changing too. She stopped confiding in me. Their inside jokes multiplied. I chalked it up to shared creative spirits. I wanted to believe we were all a little family, but the ache started quietly. Like a slow leak in the wall you don't notice until the floor caves in, a perfume I didn't recognize, a laugh that wasn't mine, a silence between us that stretched too wide to cross. I had given so much time, trust, the marrow of my daily life. I gave up stability, proximity to people who had loved me quietly and fully. And even the version of myself that asked for things like commitment, like clarity, because Lara once told me forever is a myth. But this moment is real. I had built my whole life around that moment until it shattered. The apartment didn't feel haunted. Not yet. It just felt quiet in a way that made my ears ring dot, and the days after I found them together, Lara tried to soften it. It wasn't what it looked like, she'd said that night, voice raw, clutching. A blanket around her like modesty was the issue. It was a mistake, a moment. I thought you were going to be late. Like betrayal had a schedule. Like love only mattered when it was convenient. Kira said nothing. She slipped past me the next morning like a ghost, headphones in, dance bag slung over her shoulder, mascara still on from the night before. She didn't apologize, didn't flinch. Just vanished into the studio, into the city, into someone else's version of the truth. I tried to keep going. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You wake up, you make coffee, you go to work. You water the jade plant in the kitchen and try not to notice that no one's refilled the Brita in. Days stopped, but everything felt wrong, tilted, like I was living in a painting that someone had smudged with their thumb dot at the nonprofit. I sat in meetings and nodded along to strategies I didn't care about. At home, I tried to write poems, essays, anything, but the words felt stale. Like I was mimicking my own voice dot at night. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake listening for footsteps in the hall, dreading every sound. I started locking my bedroom door, a habit I hadn't needed since childhood. Not because I was afraid of them, but because I no longer knew what they were capable of. I reread old journals. Pages full of Lara, the things I wrote when I was falling for her, little metaphors, dream fragments, half-finished sonnets. I used to write about how she lit up when she talked about design, how her fingers always looked stained with color, even when they weren't, how she called me her safe place. Every line felt like I was reading someone else's voice, a girl too eager to be chosen, too willing to let love rearrange her furniture. And then one evening, a Tuesday, I think I opened Lara's drawer, looking for my charger. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't ready to play detective. I still wanted to believe she'd come, clean, that there was an ending I could salvage, but the drawer was messy. Paper clips, lip balm, receipts. And tucked beneath a notebook was a small velvet box dot. At first, I smiled. Maybe it was for me, a peace offering. A late apology in the form of something tangible. I opened it. Dot inside, a thin chain, gold, a small charm at the center. I held it up to the light, engraved on the back, in Lara's handwriting. My fire dot, it wasn't for me. She had never called me that. Not once. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt my ribs fold in, not break. Just collapse inwards, like my body wanted to protect. My heart from even more bruising. I don't remember standing up. But suddenly I was moving fast, like my skin was too tight. I grabbed a garbage bag and began ripping her things off shelves. Sketchbooks, pillows, the perfume, the hoodie. The glass candle we bought at the street fair last fall. I tossed everything onto the floor, piled it all near the door like I was burning a ritual I couldn't finish, and when I screamed, it wasn't a sound I recognized. It came from somewhere below my stomach, primal, guttural, half grief, half fury. Lara walked in then, keys jingling, hair tied up, face glowing from some gallery event she forgot to tell me about. She froze, eyeing the mess. What the hell is this? I held up the necklace, shaking. Who is this for? She glanced at it, just glanced, like it was a receipt. You're being dramatic. That word. That word shattered something clean inside me. Dramatic. Not heartbroken. Not betrayed. Not violated. Just dramatic. I laughed. I don't know why. It wasn't joy. It was disbelief. You fucked my roommate in my bed, I whispered. And you call me dramatic. She rolled her eyes. It didn't mean anything. God, you always make everything so intense. There it was again, the shrinking of me. The way they both, Lara and Kira, had carved me down over time. I was too much, too quiet, too devoted, too intense, too boring, but mostly I was dependable, predictable, the wallpaper in the background of their lives, and suddenly I knew they had never seen me as real. Just present. Like a coat rack, like a diary, like a comfort they never had to earn. I dropped the necklace on the floor and walked into the kitchen. I poured the last of the wine down the sink. I opened the windows, letting in the night air, cold and biting. She stood behind me, arms crossed. You're overreacting. I didn't answer. I was done performing grief for people who refused to see the stage. That night, I slept on the couch. In the morning, I packed a bag, one duffel, just clothes, my notebooks, my camera. I looked at the books on the shelf, the ones we bought. Together, the mugs we shared. I left them. Some things shouldn't travel forward. Before I left, I stood in front of the mirror. My face looked older, thinner, my eyes darker, but they were mine again. And somewhere, deep under the rubble of what I gave up, something else was waiting. Not rage, not revenge. Something quieter, sharper. Clarity. I drove until the city faded behind me, until the towers became trees and the streets lost their names. The duffel bag in the back seat held only what I needed. Some sweaters, notebooks, my old denim jacket, a sketchbook I hadn't opened in 3 years, no photos, no souvenirs, no apologies. The cabin was 2 hours north, tucked into a patch of woods that smelled like pine and old earth. My aunt had left it to me when she passed, a woman I barely knew, wild-haired and wild-hearted, who had lived alone most of her life and never seemed to need permission for it. I hadn't been here since the funeral. Back then, it felt like a shrine. Now it felt like exile, but the kind I chose. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, no neighbors for at least a mile. Just the sound of leaves and the distant hum of the creek beyond. The backfield. There were no mirrors in the cabin. My aunt had taken them down years ago, said she didn't need to be watched while she was becoming someone new. I didn't understand it then. I did now. The first few days blurred. I lived in sweatshirts and thick socks, made tea I didn't drink, stared out the windows like the forest owed me answers. I didn't write. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. It was like the pain had frozen over and I was waiting for it to thaw, or for me to disappear under it. Sometimes I walked the edge of the woods, never far. The air there felt older, like it had witnessed more forgiving things. There was a fox that began appearing in the evenings, quiet and red and calm. It would sit near the porch, just at the edge of the light, watching me without fear. I started talking to it, not because I believed it understood, but because it was the first thing that didn't interrupt me. By the 4th day, I picked up my pen, not to write about Lara, not about betrayal or Kira or the wreckage they'd left. I wrote my own name over and over again, just to remember how it sounded. I wrote about my childhood, the moss that used to grow in the cracks of our backyard, the blue bike I learned to ride without training wheels, the book I carried like a talisman until the cover peeled. And slowly, without meaning to, I began writing about what I wanted, not in people, in myself. It was always easier to orbit others, to reflect what they needed, to shrink when they needed space. I had been so good at loving others that I forgot what it felt like to belong only to myself. I journaled for hours. By candlelight, on the porch, on the floor. I found old books my aunt had left behind, dog-eared poetry, gardening guides, metaphysical essays on silence. In the back of one, her script curved in faded ink. You will not die from this. But something false inside you must. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I read it out loud. That night, a storm hit, hard. Thunder so loud it shook the windows, lightning that split the dark into jagged fragments. The power went out. I lit candles and sat in the center of the floor, the shadows flickering like ghosts against the wooden walls. I didn't feel fear. I felt presence. The kind I hadn't felt in years. I found my paints in a crate in the back. Closet, dry and cracked at the edges, but still usable. I hadn't painted since college. Lara never asked why. I had told her once I used to paint, and she'd said, "That's cute," like it was a phase one outgrew. But I hadn't. I just buried it under dinners and schedules, and making sure everyone else had a soft place to land. I stretched paper across the kitchen table and began. First, a perfume bottle, small, curved, tinted pink. I painted it as I remembered it, shattered. Then the necklace, golden, a delicate chain. I painted it burning. Then the bed, ours. The sheets tangled and empty, a wine glass tipped on its side. And finally, I painted myself. Not how I looked in the mirror. I hadn't seen a mirror in days, but how I felt, wide-eyed, silent, holding a storm in my chest like a secret. Each brushstroke felt like an exhale, a truth I hadn't been allowed to say. The storm outside quieted just as I finished the last detail. A small fox in the corner, watching me from the edge of the canvas. I sat back and stared at it. Not to judge it, just to see it. For the first time since it all fell apart, I didn't feel small, or used, or invisible. I just felt real. And that was enough. The return wasn't triumphant. It was quiet. No dramatic entrances, no loud declarations. Just the weight of my suitcase on creaking apartment stairs, and the soft click of keys to a studio I'd never seen before, but already loved. It was small. A converted attic with peeling brick and high windows that let in the kind of light that makes silence feel holy. There was no furniture beyond a mattress, a writing desk I found at a thrift shop, and a chair that rocked ever so slightly when the wind came through the cracks. I wasn't trying to reclaim the old version of myself. She was gone. She had been shed in the woods, buried under pine needles and candle wax and journal entries stained with tea. This new version of me didn't owe anyone softness she hadn't chosen, and I chose words. Again. I started a blog, anonymously under the name Letters. To the girl who lied, I didn't market it. I didn't share it with friends. I just wrote. Every morning, every evening. Stories, memories, small meditations. Some days I raged. Some days I forgave. But always I told the truth. The blog found its readers, quietly, steadily. Women, hundreds of them, left comments that felt like fingerprints. This was me. I didn't know how to name this until now. Thank you for saying it. Their names varied. Their stories didn't. Each one had been loved too little or too wrongly. Each one had learned to shrink before she learned to speak. I began attending workshops again, drawn not by craft but by community. At a local art collective downtown, I met a group of women who had rebuilt themselves from splinters. One was a mother who'd left a 20-year marriage after discovering her husband's second family. Another, a sculptor whose sister had stolen her life savings. There was Mona, tall, warm, with eyes like still water, who had been abandoned by her fiancé the night before their wedding. Mona became a constant. Not romantic, not possessive. Just a steady, kind presence who didn't flinch when I was silent or scattered. She read my blog before she knew it was mine. One day, she looked up from her phone and said, "You write like someone building a bridge out of smoke." And somehow, that felt like the highest compliment I'd ever received. I hadn't spoken Laura's name aloud in months. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to dot until one night I opened my inbox. The subject. Line read, "Your blog changed me. Can we talk about publishing?" I blinked. Reread it twice. The sender was a senior editor from a small but respected press. She said the blog had been forwarded to her by a colleague, that she'd read every post in one sitting, that she saw book in it, something that could help women find themselves again. I stared at the screen for a long time, hands trembling over the keyboard. But before I could reply, another message came. It was from a reader. No name, just a link. No context. The link led to a video. A small poetry reading in a cafe, filmed on someone's phone. The angle was shaky, the audio slightly muffled. But there she was, Lara, standing on a makeshift stage, microphone in hand, her voice low and practiced, reciting a poem. My poem, word for word. A piece I wrote in the months after she left. A piece I never published anywhere but my blog. She said it was hers. The audience clapped. She smiled, gracious, fake modesty in full bloom. And just like that, the calm inside. Me cracked, but not into rage, not into grief. Into clarity. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had stolen my voice, my pain, my healing. She wore it like a costume and let people applaud her for surviving something she caused. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I opened my laptop. I began compiling. Every entry date on the blog, every journal I still had from those years. Screenshots, photos, draft versions with timestamps. Emails I had sent her, voicemails she left me. Even the art, I painted scans and signatures. I built a record. Not out of vengeance, out of truth, because something inside me had shifted. Not the ache that had passed. What remained was a sense of responsibility, not just to myself, but to the women who read my words and said, "You helped me speak." I wasn't going to let Lara take that. Not again. I sent the editor my proof. All of it. I told her I was ready, but I'd only publish under one condition, that my voice, and only my voice, be attached to the words. That we name theft where it happens. That we honor the original wound. She agreed. The book deal went through 2 weeks later. The title? The Loyal Ones Never Stay Broken. It was a phrase Mona had said once over late night coffee. I didn't even remember writing it down. But when I looked back through my journal, there it was, scribbled in the corner of a grocery list. Loyalty was never my weakness. It was my spine. I had loved with my whole being. And yes, I had lost, but I didn't stay broken. I rebuilt, alone, then among others. Then among women who knew what it meant to speak truth in rooms that never asked for it. The night I signed the contract, I stood by the window of my studio, watching the city breathe. Lara could have the applause. The fake versions of my words. I had something she never would dot myself. The invitation came on cream-colored cardstock, sealed with gold foil. Literary festival, local voices. Her name in a neat little box under closing remarks. She hesitated when she saw the lineup, not the time slot. The keynote. Lara Vance. Keynote. Speaker. Topic: healing through storytelling. And underneath, in smaller print, curated by Kira Ellis, she laughed. A quiet, stunned laugh, not bitter. Just tired of how easily the world swallowed. Liars and lipstick and lace, she almost declined. Almost. But then she remembered the women who read her blog at midnight with tears in their throats. She remembered her own hands trembling as she hit publish the first time. And the necklace in her drawer, olive leaves, gifted by a mother who taught her that silence could be sacred, but never compulsory. So she said yes. The festival was held at an old art school downtown. Industrial lighting, velvet seats, walls, lined with black and white portraits of past legends. She arrived early, charcoal suit pressed, boots shined, hair slicked back. No entourage. No PR handler. Just her and a worn notebook tucked under one arm. She didn't see Lara until just before the event started. She floated in like a wind-up music box, ivory silk, soft curls, a theatrical smile that clung to every cheek she kissed. Kira trailed, behind clipboard in hand, pretending not to notice her. She wore stilettos now, confidence like armor. They passed each other once. Kira's eyes flicked to her chest, then to her face. Recognition, a flicker of guilt. Or maybe just calculation. She didn't flinch. The MC was young and overly earnest. Introduced Lara with a kind of reverence saved for saints and survivors. Lara took the stage like she belonged. There. She spoke of sacred grief, resilience, truth reclaimed. She mentioned the power of women's stories, the beauty of vulnerability, the necessity of art in the face of betrayal. She even quoted a few lines from her latest collection, lines the narrator had written. In silence and pain. In a room, Lara had walked out of. Then the MC returned to the podium, cheeks pink, voice buzzing with nerves. Before we end today's celebration of truth and voice, she said, we have one more speaker. Someone whose work many of you have already read, perhaps without knowing her name. There was a murmur, a shuffle of programs. Please welcome the author of Letters to the Girl Who Lied. Gasps, applause, then a hush. She walked on stage, charcoal suit, clean lines, the olive leaf necklace catching light at her throat. She didn't scan the audience. She didn't look for Lara or Kira. She didn't need to. She opened her notebook. And spoke. I was never supposed to be here. She began, voice even, strong, not because I didn't earn it, but because for a long time I believed pain only mattered when someone else validated it. And when you love people who steal your voice, you learn to whisper instead of scream. The room. Still. She continued, reading not from prepared notes, but from the pages of her past. She read the poem Lara had recited at that cafe, the one she'd passed off as her own. She didn't announce it, just spoke it. Let the words fall without bitterness. Then, softly, it was written in grief, not for applause, not to be worn like jewelry by the one who caused it. She turned a page. When I started writing my blog, I didn't expect anyone to read it. I just needed to survive the version of myself that silence had created. The loyal one, the quiet one, the woman who watered every garden except her own. A few women in the audience nodded. A tissue rustled. I was called dramatic, fragile. I was told my softness was the problem, that loyalty was weakness. She looked up. For the first time. Right at Lara, and I believed it until I didn't. The air cracked, not loud, not sudden. Just the sound of 100 people collectively exhaling. She closed her notebook. Some of us are built to stay, and others to be seen leaving. But loyalty doesn't make us weak. It makes us real. Silence. Then. Applause. Not polite. Not scattered, but thunderous. Some stood. Some clapped through tears. Lara didn't move. Her face unreadable, hands clenched in her lap. Kira was gone. slipped out during the reading. Of course, she walked off stage as simply as she had walked on. No bow, no pretense dot, just breath. Just truth. Afterward, people came up to her, quietly. Women, a few men. Even a couple of teens. Thank you. I needed that. You gave words to something I thought only I felt. She smiled, genuinely, hugged a few. Took none of it for granted. Laura never approached her, but as she left, she saw her sitting. Alone, lips pressed tight, ivory dress suddenly too bright under harsh light. She walked home. No one beside her. But she wasn't empty. The city buzzed in the distance. Street lamps flickered like open eyes. She passed a window with her reflection. The olive leaves around her neck shimmered in the glass. She touched them gently. Say my name this time, she thought. Even if they never did, she had, and that was enough.